Mr. Tyson, hey bud, you turn around for me real quick? So, how much do you actually have to drink?
This guy runs a $21 billion chicken empire, and it's about to fuck it all up.
If I get in trouble tonight,
I understand, sir.
my life will be ruined.
But before we get there, let me give you some context. This guy is the son of John H. Tyson, and he owns Tyson Foods, the biggest meat company in the world. Controlling nearly 20% of all chicken, beef, and pork sold in the US, Tyson's power extends to school cafeterias, fast food chains, and grocery store shelves. Even if you've never picked up a Tyson-labeled product, chances are you've eaten their meat. And their rise to power is one of the craziest stories you'll ever hear.
I've never seen anything like this in over 20 years of covering American business.
The country's biggest poultry producers are facing a price-fixing lawsuit.
While I was employed at Tyson Foods, I witnessed suffering, injury, and inhumane death.
Even if they had symptoms, the refrain being, quote, "you have a job to do."
Tyson started as a small chicken business in the 1930s. By the 1980s, deregulation in the meat industry gave companies like Tyson the freedom to grow bigger, and they ran with it. The key to their success? Vertical integration. This means Tyson controls everything, every step of the way: the feed, the farms, and the processing plants, even the transportation. This model let Tyson cut costs and decide their own terms for farmers and suppliers. It also gave them the power to standardize operations. Over the years, they bought out competitors and expanded into pork and beef markets. This was smart because now it was a one-stop shop for meat processing. With acquisitions like IBP, Tyson secured its dominance across the meat industry. Today, Tyson generates over $52 billion a year. But being on top also means that a lot of eyebrows are raised, and for good reason. It's no secret how Tyson's rise has been followed by allegations of price fixing, environmental destruction, and poor treatment of workers. Every success has a dark side, and this one is no different. Let's start with the current chairman and heir of Tyson Foods, John Tyson, who is no stranger to controversy. If you thought driving while under the influence was his only misstep, you have another thing coming. In a headline-grabbing incident in 2022, he was arrested for public intoxication and trespassing. And get this, the police found him asleep naked in a stranger's home.
Mayville Police Department, you're not in your house. Put your hands behind your back. No. Hands behind your back. Yo. Girl who lives here doesn't know you. Came home to find you asleep in her bed.
Now that's crazy, but surely the company had a better public image. His grandfather was in charge, right? After all, he was the man responsible for building Tyson Foods from the ground up. Well, not really. Turns out he was so determined to get Tyson Foods to the top of the food chain, he wasn't above buying the loyalty of Bill Clinton's Secretary of Agriculture with bribes. The news drew so much media attention that the person in question, Mike Epsy, had to resign. This culture of living like there's no consequences isn't exclusive to the top dogs. Their managers are cut from the same cloth. During the height of COVID, 7 of them were fired over organizing a betting ring on how many employees would get COVID-19. Tyson eventually had to step in and even promised to suspend operations at the Waterloo plant where the incident took place. But the plant was back up 2 weeks later. However, this doesn't even scratch the surface of the deeper, darker secret at play here. But to understand what is going on, let's educate ourselves a little bit. After all, why is Tyson Foods so often mentioned in price-fixing scandals? What even is price fixing? Let's make it simple. There are basically 4 meat giants: Cargill, JBS, National Beef, and Tyson Foods, and all of them have been accused of colluding to inflate meat prices. Farmers claim they were forced to accept lower payments, but grocery stores and fast food chains paid more. Even a massive name like McDonald's filed a lawsuit, and you know it's real when Mickey D steps in. The franchise accused Tyson and others of ripping them off for nearly a decade. In 2020, Tyson agreed to pay $221.5 million to settle a class action lawsuit over price-fixing claims involving broiler chickens. This came after years of allegations that Tyson conspired to limit production to drive up prices. And we can learn a troubling truth from these legal battles: we're getting played. This is an industry where big players set the rules, and everyone else pays the price. But that's not the only issue here. Tyson's troubles go far beyond their pricing strategies. Their operations regulations have also taken a toll on the environment. Between 2018 and 2022, Tyson facilities dumped over 370 million gallons of wastewater into U.S. waterways. These meatpacking plants produce toxic wastewater loaded with nitrogen, phosphorus, animal parts, blood, and even dangerous pathogens like E. coli. This mix pollutes waterways and harms important marine life. And where's most of this waste ending up? Over half is concentrated in just 3 states: Nebraska, Illinois, and Missouri. Their supply chain isn't any better. Producing feed for Tyson's animals requires millions of acres of land. It's a cesspool of problems: soil erosion, water pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, you name it. But despite their power, Tyson hasn't done much to address these issues, and the problems keep coming. This time, we'll need to step into the factories. Inside Tyson's processing plants, the conditions are pretty bad. Workers have to survive dangerous environments, low wages, and relentless schedules. Remember the COVID-19 pandemic? During this time, people heard some worrying reports. Employees were being forced to work even while sick, putting their health and that of their coworkers at serious risk. And who were many of these workers? Immigrants, usually ones with limited job options. This makes them even more vulnerable to exploitation. Still, the biggest victims of this monopoly are the farmers. Tyson's tight grip on the meat industry has reshaped how farming works, and you won't like it. As a consumer, you now get fewer choices. Prices rise, quality drops, and the environment suffers. Meanwhile, Tyson's executives and shareholders pocket billions of dollars. Even in its home state of Arkansas, Tyson's influence is huge. It controls nearly all poultry processing in several counties. And over the years, half the state's poultry farms have disappeared. These contract farmers usually enter agreements with Tyson, hoping for financial stability. Instead, they find themselves locked into contracts that favor Tyson at every turn. It's tough. Farmers are required to make upgrades to their facilities to meet Tyson's demands, and these aren't cheap. But if they refuse, they risk losing their contracts entirely. It's a lose-lose situation for these folks. Many farmers end up in massive debt. Some even declare bankruptcy, since they just can't keep up with the demands of maintaining Tyson's standards, especially since the company keeps making their plants bigger, and that's a problem for ranchers. It's basically a new trend. Meat companies realize that running massive plants is cheaper than operating smaller ones, especially since it lowers the cost of processing each animal. But ranchers, they're left frustrated. When big plants shut down, like after the Tyson plant fire or during the pandemic, cattle prices drop. Meanwhile, meat companies still profit from rising beef prices. The gap between what ranchers earn for cattle and what consumers pay for beef hit record highs. These shutdowns also hurt ranchers by taking away places to sell their cattle and cutting meat production. Ranchers argue there isn't enough competition among beef processors, leaving them with fewer options and less power in the market. But Tyson profits from the arrangement. They can outsource the risks and expenses to the farmers while keeping the rewards. This imbalance shows the deeper issues in the system. Tyson's business model thrives on exploiting those with the least power, whether they're farmers, ranchers, or workers. It's not just them either, though. For consumers, this monopoly means higher prices and fewer choices. With less competition, there's little incentive for innovation or improved quality, especially since Tyson's focus is fixed on maximizing profits. In this race for profit, sustainability and ethics get left behind. The effects of Tyson's dominance ripple far beyond just the price you pay for meat. Communities near Tyson facilities often bear the brunt of the company's environmental practices. Polluted water supplies and poor air quality have sparked protests, but the company has faced little accountability. This power imbalance doesn't just affect the environment, it's a human issue too. Other than the exploitation of farmers and workers, there's the impact on public health. Studies link factory farming to antibiotic resistance. Now, this is a growing global crisis. Tyson's heavy reliance on antibiotics to boost animal growth puts everyone at risk of superbugs. This means that when you get treatment for infections, it won't be effective. Meanwhile, smaller competitors struggle to implement ethical and sustainable practices because they simply can't compete with Tyson's economies of scale. So consumers get stuck in a cycle where low costs come at the expense of health, fairness, and the planet. Breaking up Tyson's monopoly requires enforcing antitrust laws, which aim to promote fair competition. Historically, these laws have been used to break up monopolies in industries like oil and telecommunications. But in the meat industry, enforcement has been weak. Consumers have more power than they realize. By demanding better practices and supporting ethical alternatives, we can collectively challenge the status quo. After all, Tyson's story isn't just about one company. It's That's what happens when corporate greed outweighs accountability. The question is, will regulators take action, or will Tyson continue to rule the meat industry unchecked? If you want to hear more interesting stories, subscribe to the best channel ever.